When Carter told me he needed space right at the crowded O'Hare security checkpoint, I did not shed a single tear. He assumed I would return home and wait in misery like a devoted wife, forgetting that I am a top financial risk assessor. As his plane took off for his so-called journey of self-discovery, I initiated a full audit of our 4-year marriage. What I uncovered was far worse than simple betrayal. My name is Mallory Vance. At 32 years old, I was a senior risk manager for Sterling and Hart, a job that required me to look at stable situations and find the hidden cracks that could bring the whole structure down. I was excellent at my job because I never let emotion cloud my analysis. Yet, as I stood under the harsh fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare, I realized I had failed to apply a single one of those professional protocols to my own life. We were standing just before the TSA pre-check line. The plan was simple. Carter was heading to Aspen for a week of skiing with his old college buddies, a tradition they had supposedly revived this year. I had packed his thermal socks myself. I had driven him here. We were laughing about the traffic on the Kennedy Expressway just 10 minutes ago, but as we reached the point of no return, Carter stopped. The easy smile he had worn in the car vanished, replaced by a look I had never seen before. It was a cold, detached mask. He set his carry-on bag down and refused to meet my eyes. He looked over my left shoulder, focusing on a digital advertisement for life insurance. Mallory, He started, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper so the people around us would not hear. I can't do this anymore. Not right now. I blinked, my brain trying to process the input. What are you talking about? You are going to miss your flight. No, he interrupted, finally looking at me with eyes that were terrifyingly empty. I mean us. I need space. This trip. It is going to be a time for me to think about the last 4 years, about everything. He took a breath, acting as if he were the one in pain. We need a break, he said, delivering the final blow. The world did not slow down. The announcements about unattended luggage continued. The travelers around us kept rushing toward their gates. I stood completely still. I did not scream. I did not cry. My tear ducts felt dry, sealed shut by the sudden shock. Instead of emotional collapse, my mind went into a strange, hyper-focused override. I began analyzing his words and his body language as if he were a failing portfolio. Carter, I said, my voice steady but low. You are doing this now. Here I have to go, he muttered, checking his watch with exaggerated urgency. I just need time. Don't wait up. He grabbed his bag. He turned his back to me. I watched him walk toward the security officer. I waited for the hesitation. I waited for him to turn around, to look at me with regret, to offer even a shred of humanity. But he did not. He placed his bag on the conveyor belt, walked through the metal detector, and disappeared into the concourse without a backward glance. I stood there for a long time. People bumped into my shoulders, muttering apologies or annoyances, but I barely felt the impact. The cruelty of his timing was efficient. He had done this in a public place where I could not make a scene, right before a flight where he would be unreachable for hours. It was a tactical strike. My hand moved automatically to my pocket. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number, needing to hear his voice, needing him to tell me this was some sick joke. The call did not even ring. It went straight to a generic operator message. The number you have dialed is not accepting calls at this time. Blocked. He had blocked his wife of 4 years before he even boarded the plane. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the Chicago winter settled in my stomach. I turned around and walked toward the exit doors. I hailed a taxi, giving the driver the address of our luxury apartment in the Gold Coast. As the city skyline blurred past the window, the shock began to recede, replaced by the cold, hard logic of a risk assessor. Men do not ask for a break at an airport security checkpoint unless they have a destination that is not on the itinerary. The silence in our Gold Coast apartment was heavy, but the scent was worse. The air still carried the lingering notes of sandalwood and citrus from Carter's cologne, a smell that used to signal safety but now felt like a suffocating reminder of his deceit. I stood in the foyer, dropping my keys into the ceramic bowl with a sharp clatter. Most women might have collapsed onto the plush velvet sofa to weep, but I was not most women. I was a risk assessor, and I had just identified a catastrophic failure in my primary investment. I walked into the bedroom, my heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. I did not strip off my coat. Instead, I approached the walk-in closet with the scrutiny of a crime scene investigator. If Carter wanted space to think, I needed to know exactly what kind of thoughts he was packing. The ski gear section was disturbed, which was expected for a trip to Aspen. However, my eyes drifted to the formal wear. The hanger for his navy blue bespoke suit was empty. Beside it, the spot reserved for his Italian leather dress shoes was bare. "Since when do you wear Ferragamos to a ski lodge?" I whispered to the empty room. Leather soles on snow were a recipe for disaster, but they were perfect for high-end dinner dates. The narrative he had constructed at the airport was already fraying at the edges. I turned my attention to the nightstand where Carter had left our shared tablet. He usually used it to read sports news or watch movies, but today it sat there like a black box recorder waiting to be decoded. I pressed the home button and swiped to unlock it. Passcode incorrect. I stared at the screen. We had used the same 4-digit code the anniversary of our first date since we bought the device. He had changed it. "You think you are clever." "Carter," I said, my voice devoid of warmth, "but you are just sloppy." He had forgotten that I was the one who set up his entire digital life. I sat down at the edge of the bed and tapped the forgot passcode option. The system promptly informed me that a recovery link had been sent to his backup email address. That backup email was mine. Within 2 minutes, I had bypassed his clumsy attempt at security and was in. I did not waste time on his browsing history or photos yet. I went straight to the financial jugular, the credit card app. I navigated to the transaction history for our joint platinum card. I filtered the data for the last 90 days. The screen filled with rows of numbers, and as I scrolled, a pattern emerged that made my stomach tighten. Carter often claimed he had to work late at his real estate firm, citing difficult clients or closing deals. I cross-referenced those dates in my head. On October 12th, a Tuesday, he said he was at the office until midnight. The statement showed a charge for $240 at the Drake Hotel bar at 10 o'clock that night. On November 3rd, another late night, the statement showed a $300 dinner at Le Colonial. "Since when does overtime taste like French-Vietnamese fusion?" I muttered, my finger hovering over the screen. Then I found it. The smoking gun. It was a transaction from 2 weeks ago. A purchase at a high-end jewelry boutique on Michigan Avenue. The amount was exactly $5,000. I clicked on the transaction to expand the details. It was an electronic receipt for a diamond pendant necklace, but the delivery address was not our apartment, and it certainly was not his mother's house in Ohio. It was an address in Lincoln Park that I did not recognize. I did not scream. I did not throw the tablet against the wall. Instead, I stood up and walked to my home office. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. I named the file Project Truth. I began entering the data column by column: date, time, location, amount. Lie told. Carter wanted a break. I was about to give him a breakdown. I typed the address from the jewelry receipt into a reverse search database, my fingers moving across the keyboard with the precision of a pianist playing a funeral march. The search bar spun for a second before spitting out a name that made my blood run cold. Serafina. I knew that name. She was the 24-year-old junior broker Carter had hired last spring. He had come home that day raving about her potential, calling her a breath of fresh air for the firm. I navigated to Instagram and typed her name. Her profile was wide open, a public shrine to narcissism and expensive tastes that a junior broker salary could never support. I placed my tablet next to my laptop, creating a dual-screen command center. On the left was my Project Truth spreadsheet. On the right was Serafina's timeline. The correlation was sickeningly perfect. On October 12th, while Carter was allegedly finalizing a difficult closing, Serafina had posted a photo of 2 martinis at the Drake Hotel with the caption, "Work hard, play harder with the boss." On November 3rd, the night of the French-Vietnamese dinner, she had posted a blurry photo of a man's hand holding a glass of wine. I recognized the watch on the wrist immediately. It was the Tag Heuer I had bought Carter for his 30th birthday. "You didn't even try to hide it," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You arrogant fool." My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating so hard against the mahogany that I jumped. It was a message from Lena, my best friend since college. There was no greeting, just an image attachment and a frantic text below it. "Mal, please tell me you are seeing this. This is from Sarah's story. She is in Aspen right now." I opened the image. It was a screenshot of an Instagram story posted 20 minutes ago by a mutual friend who happened to be vacationing at the same resort. The photo was a wide shot of a crowded après-ski bar, meant to show off the atmosphere, but in the background, tucked away in a cozy booth near the fireplace, sat 2 figures. I pinched the screen to zoom in, the pixels expanding until the truth was undeniable. It was Carter. He was not surrounded by his rowdy group of college friends as he had claimed. There were no guys, no beer pitchers, no reminiscing about the old days. He was sitting intimately close to a woman with platinum blonde hair. His hand was resting possessively on her thigh. It was Serafina. And there, resting against her black turtleneck, was the diamond pendant. It sparkled under the lodge lights, a $5,000 beacon of my husband's infidelity. My stomach lurched violently. This was not a sudden need for space. This was not a midlife crisis or a journey of self-discovery. This was a romantic getaway he had been planning for months, paid for with our joint savings, executed right in front of my face. He had looked me in the eye at the airport, feigned emotional exhaustion, and then flown straight into the arms of his mistress. "I packed your bags," I hissed at the screen, tears of pure fury finally pricking my eyes. "I ironed your shirt so you could look good for her. The sheer calculation of it was what hurt the most." He had manipulated my empathy to facilitate his affair. He wanted me to sit at home, worrying about his mental health, while he played house in the mountains. I hovered my finger over the call button. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to call him, to scream, to send the photo to him and demand an explanation. But I stopped. If I confronted him now, he would panic. He would come up with a lie. He would say he ran into her there, or that it was a misunderstood work meeting. He would try to hide the assets. I lowered my hand. The tears receded, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. I would not give him the satisfaction of knowing I was hurting. I would not let him spin the narrative. "Enjoy your trip." "Carter," I said to the empty room, turning back to my computer, "because when you get back, I will own you." I opened a new folder on my hard drive. I needed more than just social media posts. I needed undeniable, court-admissible proof. I needed to ensure that when I finally pulled the trigger, he would stay down. I sat at my mahogany desk, the spreadsheet glowing on the screen like a war map. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, rhythmic thrumming in my veins. It was the adrenaline of crisis management. I picked up my phone and dialed the priority line for our bank. "Sterling and Hart Private Client Services. This is David speaking." The voice on the other end chirped. "David, this is Mallory Vance," I said, my voice crisp and professional. "I need to place an immediate freeze on all joint savings and investment accounts held by Carter and myself. I have detected unauthorized activity that suggests a severe security breach. Of course, Ms. Vance, I can put a temporary hold on them right now. Do you want to flag the credit cards as well?" "No," I replied, a small, icy smile touching my lips. "Leave the credit cards active. I want to monitor the perpetrator's movements. Just lock down the liquid assets so no cash can be withdrawn. Carter could swipe that card until it melted, but he would not touch a cent of the real money we had saved for a house. Next was the landlord. I did not ask for permission. I informed him. Mr. Henderson, I am terminating the lease for Unit 42. Be effective immediately. I told him. I am aware of the 3-month penalty clause. I will wire the full amount from my personal account by end of business today. He sputtered about notice periods, but money talks louder than contracts. With the housing secured, I began the physical dismantling of our life. I moved through the apartment with boxes, sorting items into 2 categories: mine and garbage. Technically, Carter's things were the garbage. I went down to the storage locker in the basement to find more packing tape, while shifting a stack of Carter's old winter gear to get to the supplies. A shoebox for heavy-duty snow boots tumbled off the shelf. It hit the concrete with a heavy thud, the lid popping off. Inside, there were no boots. Instead, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, was an iPhone with a cracked screen. I frowned. I recognized this phone. It was his old device from 2 years ago, the one he claimed he had traded in for an upgrade. I took it upstairs and plugged it in. It still held a charge. The passcode was the same simple 4-digit PIN he used for everything back then. I opened the messaging app and found a thread with a contact saved simply as S. The timestamps dated back 6 months. She is suffocating me. S. Carter had written, I come home and it is like walking into a compliance meeting. She is so dry. No passion. Just schedules and spreadsheets. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but I forced myself to keep reading. You are the only one who makes me feel alive. Another message read, Mallory controls everything. She treats me like an employee, not a husband. I just need to find the right time to leave without her destroying me financially. You coward, I whispered, my hand tightening around the phone until my knuckles turned white. You absolute coward. He had painted me as a villain to justify his own lack of character. He used my competence, the very thing that paid for his lifestyle, as the reason for his betrayal. I did not smash the phone. I connected it to my laptop. I used a forensic extraction tool to download every text, every photo, and every voice note. I uploaded the files to 3 different encrypted cloud servers and copied them onto an external hard drive. With the evidence secured, I opened a fresh document. I began drafting a unilateral divorce petition. I knew the law, but I needed a shark. I dialed the number of Jessica Pearson, my law school roommate who was now a partner at a top family law firm in the city. Mallory, she answered, sounding surprised. It has been ages. Is everything okay? No, Jess, it is not, I said, staring at the hard drive on my desk. I need to file for divorce, and I need it to be brutal. I have proof of infidelity, misuse of marital funds, and premeditated deception. I want the house savings. I want the car, and I want him to be left with nothing but his debt. There was a pause on the line, followed by the sound of a pen clicking. Send me what you have, Jessica said, her tone shifting instantly to professional combat mode. If he wants a war, we will give him a nuclear winter. Among the chaos of cardboard boxes and bubble wrap, a notification pinged on my laptop that offered a lifeline out of this wreckage. It was an email from the executive recruiter at Vanguard Holdings, a direct competitor to my current firm, based in New York City. They wanted to interview me for the position of director of strategy. The timing was so perfect it felt like divine intervention. I set up my laptop on a stack of books to get the right angle, ensuring the camera captured only the blank white wall behind me and none of the packing tape scattered across the floor. I put on my favorite emerald green blazer, fixed my hair, and logged into the video conference. Mallory, your portfolio is impressive, the hiring manager said, leaning into his camera. But this role requires someone who can make hard decisions when the market is volatile. How do you handle high-pressure pivots? I looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of the cold resolve that had kept me standing for the last 48 hours. Risk is simply a variable you have not accounted for yet, I said, my voice steady and authoritative. I do not panic when the market crashes. I analyze the debris, I calculate the salvage value, and I build a structure that is immune to the same failure. I am not just looking to manage risk. I am looking to exploit it for gain. I could see them nodding. They loved the aggression. They had no idea I was talking about my marriage. When the call ended, I felt a surge of power. I was not a victim. I was a commodity, and my value was going up. Meanwhile, Carter was trying to keep his own stock high. He continued to bombard my inbox with emails that were dripping with manufactured sentiment. Mal, honey. One read, sent at 2 in the afternoon. I am just sitting here looking at the mountains, thinking about us. I miss you. I really think this time apart is going to make us stronger. I just need to find myself again. I did not reply. I did not type out a furious draft and delete it. I simply archived it into the folder marked evidence. My silence was a vacuum, and I knew it was starting to unnerve him. I opened the banking app on my phone. While he was allegedly sitting and thinking about us, the transaction history told a different story. He had just racked up a $400 lunch tab at Cloud9 Bistro. And now, at 7 o'clock in the evening, a pending authorization was trying to go through for Matsuhisa, the most expensive sushi restaurant in Aspen. You want to play the big shot with my money, I whispered, watching the pending circle spin. Let's see how you pay for that toro tartare. I dialed the number on the back of my own card. Customer service. How can I help you? Hi, I said, injecting a note of frantic worry into my voice. This is Mallory Vance. I can't find my credit card. I think I dropped it on the street. I need you to cancel it immediately. Certainly, Mrs. Vance. I can secure that for you right now. Any transactions currently processing will be declined for your protection. Thank you. I said, please, just shut it all down. Done. The card is inactive. I hung up and watched the screen. 3 minutes later, a push notification appeared. Transaction declined. Matsuhisa Aspen, $850. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. The waiter returning to the table. The awkward whisper. Carter patting his pockets, his face flushing red in front of Serafina. He would have to use his own debit card, the one linked to his nearly empty personal account. The doorbell rang, breaking my reverie. It was Lena, carrying 2 bottles of Pinot Noir and a roll of heavy-duty packing tape. She took one look at my face and grinned. You look like the cat that just ate the canary, Lena said, kicking off her shoes. Better, I replied, taking the wine bottle from her. I am the cat that just canceled the canary's credit limit. We sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by boxes labeled kitchen and books. Lena poured the wine into 2 mugs because I had already packed the crystal glasses. To freedom, Lena said, raising her mug. And to New York, to the truth, I corrected her, clinking my mug against hers. And to making him pay for every single lie. The week of silence from my end had clearly rattled Carter, because his texts shifted from vague platitudes to urgent scheduling. On Sunday morning, my phone lit up with a message that made me scoff out loud in the empty kitchen. Boarding now, the text read. I have done a lot of thinking up here. Mal, I want to come home. We need to sit down and really talk about our future. I am ready to fix this. Ready to fix this, I repeated to the coffee maker, my voice flat, as if you did not just spend $5,000 on a diamond necklace for your coworker. He thought he was returning to a wife who was desperate for his attention, a woman who would be grateful for the scraps of his affection. He had no idea he was walking into an ambush. Just as I was about to set the phone down, another notification buzzed. It was from a number I did not have saved, but the area code was local. Miss you already, babe. "The bed feels so big without you," the text read. Attached was a photo. It was a selfie taken in a hotel mirror, showing Serafina in a silk robe, with Carter asleep in the background, his mouth slightly open, oblivious to the camera. A second later, another text followed OMG. "So sorry. Wrong number." I stared at the screen. It was a classic power move. She wanted me to see it. She wanted to provoke a fight, to force me to kick him out so she could have him all to herself without the guilt of being the other woman. She wanted to be the catalyst. I did not reply. I did not rage. I simply pressed the side buttons on my phone and took a screenshot. "Thank you, Serafina," I whispered, saving the image to the cloud. "You just provided the final slide for my presentation." I spent the next 2 hours doing the final sweep of the apartment. My clothes were gone. My books were boxed and moved to a storage unit I had rented that morning. My jewelry, my laptop, and my personal documents were all safely in the trunk of my car. The apartment was now a shrine to Carter. His dirty laundry was in the hamper, his half-read magazines were on the coffee table, and his espresso pods were on the counter. It looked lived in, but only by him. I walked over to the printer, which had been running hot for the last 20 minutes. I gathered the stack of warm paper. It was thick, easily 200 pages. I organized the documents with the ruthless efficiency of an auditor. Section 1, the financials. Section 2, the digital trail. Section 3, the photographic evidence. I placed the screenshot of Serafina's text at the very back, the cherry on top of a poisonous sundae. I bound the pages into a neat, black dossier. I placed the dossier in the center of the kitchen island. Next to it, I placed a handwritten note on a piece of heavy cardstock. It had only one sentence. "Here is the space you asked for." I picked up my phone and dialed the utility company. "Yes, this is Mallory Vance," I said. "I need to disconnect the internet and cable service for my address. Effective today. Yes, shut it all down." I looked at the router lights in the corner of the room, one by one. They flickered and died. The apartment went digitally dark. Carter would come home to a silent house with no Wi-Fi to distract him from the reality of what he had done. Finally, I made the calls that would seal his fate. I called my parents first, then his. "Hi, Mom," I said, forcing a cheerfulness into my voice that felt like acid in my throat. "Carter is coming home tonight. I think we are turning a corner. I would love for you and Dad to come over around 7. I invited the Vances, too. We want to have a family dinner. It is important." "Oh, honey, that is wonderful," my mother exclaimed. "We knew you two could work it out. We will bring the wine." I hung up and dialed Carter's mother. She was equally relieved, praising me for being such a patient and understanding wife. "We will be there at 7 sharp," she promised. I am so glad he got that trip out of his system. I ended the call and stood in the center of the living room. The sun was beginning to set over Chicago, casting long shadows across the floor. The stage was set, the audience was invited, and the villain was on his way home, completely unaware that the final act had already been written. Carter unlocked the front door and stepped into the apartment, likely expecting the heavy atmosphere of a domestic dispute. He probably anticipated that I would be sitting on the couch with puffy eyes, or perhaps pretending to sleep in the bedroom to make him feel guilty. Instead, he was greeted by absolute silence. To a narcissist like Carter, silence was not a warning sign. It was simply an annoyance. He assumed I was playing a game, the sulking wife trying to punish him for his brave journey of self-discovery. I was standing just outside in the hallway, listening as he tried to call my phone. I watched the screen of my device light up in my palm, silencing the vibration instantly. Inside, I could hear his footsteps pacing the hardwood floors. "Pick up the phone. Mallory," he muttered, his voice muffled by the door but loud enough to betray his growing irritation. "Stop being so childish." He was angry not because I was missing, but because I was not available to validate his return. He needed an audience, and the theater was empty. Right on cue, the elevator dinged. My parents and his parents stepped out, carrying casserole dishes and expressions of deep concern. I quickly stepped into the stairwell alcove to remain unseen, watching as they knocked on the door. Carter opened it, and the performance began immediately. "Mom, Dad," Carter said, his voice dropping an octave to sound weary and burdened. "I am so glad you are here. It has been a really long week." They filed inside, and I moved closer to the door, pressing my ear against the wood to hear the script he had improvised. "Where is Mallory?" his mother asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Is she okay? I don't know." Carter sighed, a sound that was practiced to perfection. "She has been unstable. To be honest, that is why I went to Aspen. She told me she was having a breakdown. She said she needed space to figure out who she was without me. I left to give her that room, to let her heal." I had to cover my mouth to suppress a dark, humorless laugh. He was painting me as the hysterical woman to cover his own tracks. "That does not make sense," my mother said, her tone sharp and analytical. "Mallory is the most rational person I know. She does not have breakdowns." "Carter, she solves problems. I know." "Helen, I know," Carter replied, sounding patronizingly patient. "But work has been stressful, and I think the pressure just finally cracked her. I came back early because I was so worried. I just hope she hasn't done something rash." He was digging his grave with a golden shovel. "Let me check the bedroom again," he said, likely wanting to escape my mother's penetrating gaze. Maybe she fell asleep. I heard his heavy footsteps moving down the hall toward the master bedroom. There was a pause, a moment of silence where I imagined him opening the door. Then, the closet door slid open on its tracks. The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of a man who had stepped off a cliff and just realized gravity was working. He had expected to see my color-coordinated blazers and rows of heels. Instead, he was staring at empty space. I had stripped the closet bare of anything that proved I had ever lived there. No clothes, no jewelry boxes, no sentimental trinkets. "What the?" I heard him whisper, the confidence draining out of his voice. He came rushing back into the living room, his footsteps frantic and uneven. "Her stuff is gone," he stammered, the smooth facade crumbling into genuine panic. "Her clothes, her suitcases. Everything is gone." "What do you mean gone?" his father asked. "I mean, empty." Carter's voice cracked. "She didn't just leave for the night. She moved out." The air in the room was thick with confusion and rising fear. He was realizing that this was not a tantrum he could charm his way out of. This was a tactical extraction. I checked my reflection in my compact mirror, applied a fresh coat of red lipstick, and smoothed the lapels of my trench coat. It was time. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. "Hello, everyone?" I said, stepping into the room with a bright, razor-sharp smile. I hope I didn't miss the toast. I stepped past the threshold and walked straight into the living room, ignoring the man who was technically still my husband. I did not even glance at him. Instead, I walked over to his parents and mine, offering them a calm, polite nod as if I were arriving at a board meeting rather than a domestic disaster. "Good evening. Helen, Dad," I said, my voice steady and devoid of tremors. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance, thank you for coming on such short notice." Carter, sensing that his narrative was about to slip away, lunged toward me with his arms wide open. He was attempting to physically reclaim the space, to force a reconciliation scene that would make everyone sigh with relief. "Mal." "Oh, thank God," he exclaimed, his face contorting into a mask of relieved exhaustion. I was so worried about you, baby. Just come here." He reached for me, but I stepped back sharply. I raised my hand, palm out, stopping him in his tracks. The gesture was precise and final. "Do not touch me," I said, my tone freezing the air in the room, "and do not call me that." Carter froze, his hands hovering in mid-air. The room fell silent. My mother straightened her back, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Please, everyone, take a seat," I commanded, gesturing to the sectional sofa. "Carter has told you a story about my mental health. He told you I needed space. Now, I am going to show you exactly why this marriage is over." I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The 65-inch television mounted on the wall, a luxury item Carter had insisted we needed for football season, flickered to life. I mirrored my display. Carter's eyes widened as the screen turned black, then displayed a title slide I had prepared in PowerPoint. It read, "The Cost of Betrayal, a Liability Audit." "Mallory, what is this?" Carter stammered, his eyes darting between me and his parents. You don't have to do this. We can talk in private. We are done talking," I replied. I swiped to the next slide. The first image was the photo from the airport security footage I had requested from the privacy office. Paired with the Instagram post from Serafina, the timestamps were highlighted in red. "Exhibit A," I narrated, pacing slowly in front of the television like I was delivering a quarterly review. Carter claimed he needed a break from our marriage at the security checkpoint. 40 minutes later, he met Serafina, a 24-year-old junior broker from his firm, at the gate. I swiped again. The screen filled with the photo Lena had sent me, Carter and Serafina in the lodge, his hand on her leg, the diamond necklace glittering at her throat. "That is the necklace I supposedly bought." "Mrs. Vance whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "He told me he bought it for your anniversary. He bought it with our joint savings." I corrected her without looking away from Carter. $5,000. "While he told you he was on a journey of self-discovery, he was actually on a romantic getaway." The next slide was a collage of text messages. I had enlarged the font so everyone could read the cruelty clearly. "She is so boring. S." One message read on the giant screen. "Mallory is like a robot. I only married her because she is stable. I need your fire." My father's face turned a dark, dangerous shade of purple. Carter's mother looked like she was going to be sick. "Turn it off," Carter yelled, panic finally shattering his composure. "Mallory, stop it. That is private." He lunged for the television, desperate to cut the feed, to hide the ugly truth of his character, but he never made it. My father, a man who had served 20 years in the Marine Corps, stood up. He did not shout. He simply stepped in Carter's path and placed a heavy hand on his chest, shoving him back onto the ottoman. "You will sit down," my father growled, his voice low and terrifying. "And you will listen to what my daughter has to say." Carter slumped back, defeated, as I advanced to the final slide. It was an audio file icon. "And finally," I said, my finger hovering over the play button, "the financial reality." I pressed play. Carter's voice, slurred and boastful, filled the room. It was a recording from a night out with his friends 6 months ago. "Yeah, the debt is bad." Carter's recorded voice laughed, "But Mallory doesn't know. I just need to keep playing the good husband role a little longer. Her bonus comes in next month. I can use that to pay off the bookie before my knees get broken. She is my cash cow." "Boys," the recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Carter sat with his head in his hands, unable to look at his parents, while I stood tall, the remote control in my hand like a gavel that had just delivered a guilty verdict. The room was silent, save for the hum of the television screen where the audio waveform had just flatlined. The revelation about the gambling debt was the final nail in the coffin of his character. I watched as the realization washed over his parents. They knew about the savings account we had been building for a down payment on a house in the suburbs. They now realized that the $80,000 we had saved was likely gone, funneled into offshore betting sites to cover his losses. Mrs. Vance let out a sob that sounded like something physically breaking inside her chest. She looked at her son not with love, but with a profound, crushing disappointment. "You stole from her, Mrs.?" Vance whispered, her voice shaking. You gambled away her hard work. I raised you better than this. Carter." She turned to me, tears streaming down her face, and reached for my hand. "Mallory, I am so sorry. I had no idea. This is unforgivable." Carter opened his mouth to speak, to spin another web of lies, but before he could make a sound, my phone, which was still mirrored to the 65-inch television, began to ring. It was a video call. The caller ID filled the giant screen, overlaid on top of the evidence. "Incoming video call Serafina." The timing was comedic perfection. Carter lunged for the phone on the coffee table, but I was faster. I picked it up and, instead of declining, I tapped the green answer button. On the massive screen, Serafina's face appeared in high definition. She was wearing a silk robe, holding a glass of wine, clearly expecting a private recap of his successful return home. "Hey, baby," she cooed, her voice amplified by the surround sound system. "Did you finally dump the boring W?" She stopped. Her eyes went wide. Because I had flipped the camera. On her screen, and mirrored on our television, she did not see Carter's adoring face. She saw a panoramic view of the living room. She saw my father, looking like he wanted to commit a felony. She saw my mother, arms crossed in judgment. She saw Carter's parents weeping in shame. And finally, she saw Carter, slumped on the ottoman, looking like a cornered rat. "Oh my God!" Serafina squeaked, and the line went dead instantly. The silence returned, but this time it was heavy with Carter's total humiliation. He slid off the ottoman onto his knees, crawling toward me across the rug. "Mal, please," he sobbed, clutching at the hem of my pants. She means nothing. She seduced me. Mal. It was a mistake. I was weak. I can fix this. Please, don't let this end." I looked down at him. I did not feel anger anymore. I did not feel hate. I looked at him and realized he was just a bad investment I had held onto for too long. "Get up, Carter," I said, my voice cool and detached. "You are embarrassing yourself." I walked over to the side table where the dossier sat. "My lawyer sent the divorce petition to your office this morning," I informed him. "It cites adultery and financial fraud. Given the evidence I just presented, and the recording of your admission to theft, I suggest you sign it without contest. If you fight me, I will make sure the forensic accountants find every single cent you hid." He stared at me, his mouth gaping open, tears streaking his face. "And as for this apartment," I continued, gesturing to the luxurious space he loved so much, "I removed my name from the lease and paid the termination fee. The landlord will be here on the 1st of the month to reclaim the keys. You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. I suggest you ask Serafina if she has a guest room." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my diamond wedding band. It felt heavy in my hand, weighted down by 4 years of false promises. I placed it gently on the table, right next to the black binder labeled Project Truth. The metal made a soft clink against the glass surface. "I am moving to New York tomorrow morning," I announced, looking at my parents and then at his. "I have accepted a position as the Director of Strategy at Vanguard Holdings. This part of my life is closed." I turned my back on him for the last time. He was still kneeling on the floor, a man who had everything and lost it all because he thought he was smarter than the woman who balanced his books. I stepped out of the apartment and pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me, instantly silencing the chaotic symphony of Carter's begging and his mother's heartbroken sobbing. I did not pause to listen. I walked to the elevator, my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the corridor floor. When I stepped out of the building and into the biting night air of Chicago, I expected to feel the chill. Instead, I felt a weightlessness in my chest that made me dizzy. I took a deep breath, inhaling the freezing wind, and exhaled the toxicity of the last 4 years. It was over. 6 months later, the view from my corner office on the 42nd floor overlooked the glittering steel canyons of Manhattan. I was wrapping up a strategy meeting for a merger worth $2 billion. The risk assessment is solid, I told the board members, my voice echoing with a confidence that had been forged in fire. We proceed with the acquisition. As the room cleared, my phone buzzed against the glass surface of the conference table. It was a message from Lena. She was still back in Chicago, acting as the final link to a world I had left behind. You did not hear this from me, the text read, but Carter got fired today. The rumor about the gambling debt and the forensic audit spread through the real estate association like wildfire. He is finished in this town. And guess who walked out on him? Serafina packed her bags the second she realized the money tap was dry. I stared at the screen. A year ago, this news would have felt like a triumph. It would have been a moment of vindictive joy. But as I read the words now, I felt nothing. No spark of anger, no surge of glee. It was just information, as relevant to my current life as a weather report for a city I no longer lived in. I did not type a reply. I did not forward it. I simply swiped left on the conversation. Delete, I whispered. I erased the message. Then, to ensure the bridge was truly burned, I deleted the contact entirely. I was done looking in the rearview mirror. I left the office early and walked to Central Park. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the autumn leaves. I stopped at my favorite coffee kiosk and ordered a latte. I found a quiet bench and pulled a fresh, leather-bound notebook from my bag. I opened it to the first page and wrote a single word at the top, Paris. I began to plan. A week in the Marais, a cooking class in Lyon, a train ride to the coast. There were no spreadsheets for someone else's approval. There were no compromises for a husband who did not appreciate me. There was just me, my success, and a horizon that stretched out endlessly. I took a sip of the warm coffee and smiled. It was a genuine, radiant smile. I realized then that I had won, not because he had lost everything, but because I had found myself. The best revenge was not destroying them. It was living a life so brilliant, so vibrant, and so complete that they became nothing more than a faded footnote in my history. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this journey with even more people.